It's already live. Just trying to make sure that we've got audio.
Okay, I've got 6 o'clock, so I think we will get started. I want to welcome you to Heston High School this evening. Because we have multiple board of education members here, we're going to let them open the meeting real fast. Susan, I think that is you. Very good, okay. Appreciate you being here. We also appreciate those who are joining us through the Slaughter Sports Network, the online stream. Tonight our topic is facilities. My name is Ben Proctor, I'm the superintendent, and I believe I know most everybody here. You're not going to hear from me the whole time. We're going to have a variety of people speak to you this evening about facilities, and what I want to do is kind of set the objective so you know the purpose of the meeting this evening, what the phase that we're currently in is, and how we want to move forward. So what you're going to hear this evening is an overview of an informal needs assessment process that we've gone through. We've had a number of groups that have focused attention on needs in each school building, as well as athletic facilities and some of our infrastructure. We've done some analysis of infrastructure, and we're going to get some reports on that. And secondly, we're going to hopefully share enough information that as we move forward, as we take next steps, that the community can give adequate feedback to the Board of Education so that they can make decisions about what we can do to address facilities moving forward. So those are our 2 primary objectives this evening. And to set the stage, I'm going to share just a little bit of information up front that I think can be helpful as we talk about how we're going to make decisions related to facilities. So many of you, raise your hand if you've seen this document or something like this before. Most everybody. I should have said raise your hand if you haven't. This has been kind of a long-standing vision or framework document that we've used in Heston to make decisions. I'm not going to go over all the details of it this evening, but to give you an idea, we want to, whether it's facilities, whether it's curriculum, instruction, hiring, whatever it is, I'm going to take this off. I'm not going to be able to talk with it on. Whatever it is, we want to run through decisions with this lens on. We want to talk about how do student success outcomes, how are those impacted by the decisions that we made, how are our beliefs and practices impacted, and then at the bottom we call them our SWOT, or habits of character and scholarship. What do those mean in the context of the decisions that we made, and use this to, again, provide that lens to make those decisions. And we want to do that with facilities or anything that we do in USD 460. And that document is available online. If you go to our website, under the district tab, you'll find that. Secondly, I want to show you how we make decisions right now on an annual basis. So whether it's curriculum or personnel, community partnerships, capital outlay on the right, we use what we call our district priorities document. This is also available on our website, and you can see those every year from 2021 all the way back to 2015. You'll see a similar format broken down by short-term priorities and long-term goals. What we try to do every year as a board, our Board of Education, will put this together, and we try to take care of all those things that are in the bottom section, the short-term priority list. You can find that again year after year since 2015, and you can see the things that we've been able to take care of over time. The third thing I want to show you is an overview of how we make decisions about capital outlay purchases and improvements each year on an annual basis. So when we have something break down, how do we pay for it? Examples would be school buses. So over the past 3 or 4 years, we have purchased 5 school buses. All that's come out of capital outlay. We've applied for some grants and those types of things. Anytime HVAC breaks down, when we need to replace the track, it all comes out of this fund. It has a separate assessment, so we assess mills, up to 8 mills, for that fund specifically, and then we also receive state aid from our capital, or for our capital outlay fund as well. So you can see over time, on the left-hand side, it says FY14 all the way to FY21. So FY14 stands for fiscal year 2014, which would be the 13-14 school year. And all the way back then, you can see how the numbers have changed from the left column all the way to the right column. And our board, over the past 5 or 6 years, has been dedicated to making sure that we get more money in that capital outlay fund to take care of the needs that at one time we couldn't take care of. So I always like to use the example that back in the 15-16 school years, actually the 14-15 school year, we were having to finance things that were essential that we purchase because we didn't have enough money in our capital outlay fund. We may have had enough money to take care of that item, but we would not have had additional money available if something else broke down. So you can see the focus that's been put and the energy that's been put into that over the years to where now we've got a much healthier capital outlay budget and can address our needs on an annual basis. And that document is also available on our website. At the bottom, if you look at our FY21 budget, you'll see $952,800. That's a maximum number. We typically budget over what we think we'll spend, but that gives us the authority, should we needed to spend that amount. What we've actually spent, or what's remaining from that $952,000, is a little under $500,000, but what we actually have remaining in our capital outlay fund is about $1.4 million. Again, that puts us in a position where we can take care of needs as they come up. Last thing I want to walk through, and then we're going to have Mrs. Crable come up and her team and talk about the elementary school specifically. But the timing of our conversation around facilities lines up with our bond and interest payoff. So in 2002, how many of you were here in Heston when the last bond issue was run in 2002? Okay, quite a few folks remember that. And the total amount of that project was $13.7 million. As we look back on the last 20 years, the average mill assessment, property tax assessment rate was about 15.3 mills, and we paid that bond off in September of 2022. So a little over a year from now, we'll pay that off. We owe about $2.3 billion. We have 3 remaining payments, so we're getting very close to paying off that 2002 bond issue. Some of the things that were highlights of that, a substantial remodel of the elementary school that we still enjoy very much, right, Mrs. Crable? Some remodel of the high school office area, auxiliary gym, which we also enjoy very much. Some aesthetic improvements, asbestos abatement, that was a big one. Kind of have gone back through numbers of all these different projects. And we're glad a lot of those things were taken care of at that time. But I think it's important as we kind of situate the conversation about facilities in the context of where we are right now in time, that we know there's some options as we look forward into next year as we pay that bond issue off. And we'll talk more about that at the end of our session tonight. So with that being said, I'm going to have Mrs. Crable and her team come up, and they're going to talk about some needs assessments that were done at the elementary school, and then we'll have Mr. Heinrichs at the middle school come up after that.
Okay, hi, I'm Elisa Crable, and I'm principal at Heston Elementary. I have with me 2 members of our long-term facilities team at the elementary. That's Dawn Lafferty, counselor, and Janaea Heinrichs, who teaches 2nd grade. This team was made up of parents and employees, and some wore both hats. So we had Johann Reimer joining us, Brad Coleman, Elizabeth O'Halloran, Dee Landis, Don Lafferty, Janaea Heinrichs, Janae Kaufman, Sarah McAllister, and Elizabeth Kuhn rounding out our elementary team. We had a series of 2 meetings, and I'll share briefly what we did at those. The first meeting was a tour of our facility, looking and noting the positives as well as areas that we would like to improve or needs within our building. Like Mr. Proctor said, our building was the recipient of much of the glass bond issue, and so we are enjoying those additions and the improvements that were made to the building. And you will notice some of those are some of the strengths that you will see listed on the next couple of slides that describe some of the things that we enjoy every day. That meeting also gave us an opportunity to create a list of needs that would take and move our building forward. And so that evening we generated a pretty healthy list, and then we worked through that list at our second meeting. And during that opportunity, we looked at our list of things that we needed for improvements or needs within our building, and how did that connect with our district's improvement framework. Following that discussion, we looked at our list and really narrowed down what would be our top priorities. And you know how we in this district often use cooperative learning structures. We did that too as adults, and really narrowed our list to 8. 8 of the top things that we felt were important. They fit really nicely into 3 categories related to the improvement of safety in our building, instructional spaces, and we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like, and infrastructure. Now, let's talk a little bit about some of the things that make Heston Elementary so great. We really feel like we have some strong things such as our common areas. We enjoy that 1, 2, and 3, 4 commons every single day. We have children, we have small groups using that, and in fact, our 3rd and 4th grade commons now is our secondary lunchroom. So what a wonderful use of space, and really provides many, many uses. We also have large classrooms that are in close proximity to each other. Grade levels are connected together. Students do not have to travel far from one room to the next if they would move rooms. Teachers the same way. Just really large classrooms for teachers. We have a very nice large library that provides both an instructional area and a circulation space used in a variety of different ways. An art room dedicated just for art. And recently we've had the updates of the playground and the soccer field, which our students use and take advantage of every day. Also connected to our rec department, so what a great way to work hand in hand. And then finally, much needed was additional parking, and we use that every day as well. So many of those things that we've put money towards in our community we have reaped the benefit of that. At this time, we're going to talk a little bit about that needs list that we generated as a team. Okay, so my job this evening is to talk about this part, the problematic aspects of the building that we came up with as we were all brainstorming together. And the first thing on our list that we thought was important to address would be the safety of our area. We feel like it's like the students have seen it on these equipment so that's happened, and that really importantly right now we rely on engineers and Currently, right now, the daycare uses the basement, downstairs, and it is not, handicap accessible. There are no bathrooms down there, or running water. They've done a really nice job of making that space as welcoming, functional as they can, but it would be really beneficial for them to have, a space that they could use in a really different way. We also talked about, a year safe shelter. Because currently our, community safety space is down there with the after-school program in the basement. And like I just mentioned, it's not handicap accessible. And in the event of a big emergency, that would be really, really important. One thing, no, it'll be on the next one. Okay, all right, then that is the one. Oh, well, yes, building something, outside of the building, according to green standards, instead of sharing that space with our daycare campus. Alright, I'm going to be talking about changes that, might be necessary to support our goals. The first one would be, some additional learning spaces. We mentioned earlier that the one two commons right now, that is our computer lab right now. And usually we have a computer lab that uses a COVID moved over to projector. It has been a really great space to have. We have it in first and second, as well as third and fourth, but kindergarten does not have an additional space, so that would be a benefit to them, functionality wise, and to be able to get all the students together. Small group areas. We have lots of Title I groups that run together, and we kind of discovered it would be really great to be able, although we have these great group spaces, it would be nice to have some additional, maybe enclosed smaller spaces as well, so you don't have the crossover between the small groups trying to run their lessons at the same time with people in and out, so that can be cause a little confusion with, students that really in small group setting that would be beneficial. And then outdoor learning infrastructure. We have been learning outside more than ever this year, and it has been really enjoyable for the kids and for the adults as well. But what we discovered with elementary is the spaces we do have, especially when we came back in August, they got hot really fast because we just don't have shade. I know sometimes we kind of wait until the very end of the day and there can be just a little bit of shade thrown on the inside of the building, and we can get some kids out there. There's a few trees that are near the parking lot, so you can maybe turn off some spaces there, but it would be really great to have some spaces that are shaded with seating that we could use as needed, or as we would like to use them. And then finally, the last one is drainage. We have some major drainage problems in the elementary. The front parking lot is problematic. When there's heavy rains, there's right outside our front doors, there's an overhang, and water kind of barrels off of there as kids are trying to arrive or leave, and it all kind of conglomerates right where people are trying to drop their children off, so that is not handy. Our second one that you might have noticed lately is our playground right west of the big play structure. We have, I lovingly call it Slapper Lake, and when it rains hard, the water just pools there, and it will be there for days if we don't have someone come and take care of it and bring it up. And then finally, a few years ago, out of a concrete pad on the north side of our building as you exit to the playground. But when we have ice or snow, that becomes really hazardous area because the ice and snow is not like to melt off of that concrete because it is on the north side. So that the water coming off there, they've made some improvements to it, but we aren't able to use that as much as we'd like to.
discussion that's really good. So that would be beneficial. And the last one I have is updated flooring throughout the building, because our flooring has been in there since the 2002 remodel. So I think that's what I have. Oh. Oh, okay. Oh, yes, this is a big deal. We have a bathroom. I mean, they're little kids, but we have a bathroom problem at the elementary because in our 1-2 commons, we have 60 to 65 or 70 kids at a time learning in that area, and we have 3 bathrooms for girls and 3 bathrooms for boys. It's always kind of been something where we've known we just don't have a lot of bathrooms down there. But this year when we've been washing hands all the time and things like that, that has really, there's only 3 hand washing stations as well, and we're trying to get kids to lunch, so that's been a challenge. But we could really benefit from a few more stalls, a few more bathroom spaces. So there's one in the front that has 2 for girls and I think 2 for boys. But the 3rd and 4th grade has more. So the more you have, the quicker you can get those kids in and out. So it's very helpful. Thank you. Okay, I think it's middle school's turn to share their reflections.
Thank you, Mrs. Crable. My name is Greg Heinrichs, and I'm the principal of the middle school. And just like Mrs. Crable said, we'll kind of transition to our building. We took kind of a parallel route, I think, in a lot of different ways to what you just heard from the middle school, or the elementary school, as far as what the process looks like. We also had a series of meetings. We ended up having 3 meetings with parents and community members, a handful of staff, and then the one addition that I don't think at the elementary school they did this, but we actually had 9 students who jumped in and were part of our conversations. And I'll just say as a side note, that was awesome. And I see 2 of our middle school students here tonight. And it was great to hear a student perspective. And I was just, these, sometimes maybe we think of these as adult sorts of conversations because they're complex. And our students jumped right in and had great comments and great perspectives. So kudos to our middle school students for giving that perspective for those conversations. That was awesome. Like I said, we had 3 meetings. The first meeting that we had was, we took a tour of our building, and we just did our best to, I think, poke our heads into every single classroom and hallway and every space we had, and just speak to how those spaces are used and what comes to mind as far as strengths and issues, just as you kind of look at things on a surface level. We probably, I think, in our conversations, we kind of term this, what are the easy things that we just see or even feel when we walk into those spaces? And then we came back to the library, and in groups, we did our best to just brainstorm what kinds of issues arose, what kind of strengths came to the surface from just a quick tour of our building. Our second meeting, a couple weeks after that one, we started to sort of prioritize those lists that we had started creating from the first meeting, and then we also did our best to connect our thoughts towards that district and vision document. You saw Mr. Proctor share that, or you saw that on the screen. Mr. Proctor shared that, and we had some really good discussions around some aspects of that district vision that we always try to refer to when we make decisions. And then our last meeting, we did our best to sort of break, I think, some of our thoughts into three different categories. And maybe this is just a different way of prioritizing things. We had kind of an easy list, things that, just take a little bit of money and a little bit of time. Paint would be one of those as a really good example. There were lots of others, but what's on the easy list? And then a second category of improvements we thought, or the question that I posed to the group was, if we were to keep the current middle school footprint, but just remodel within that, what would kind of come to the surface, or what would your thoughts be? And then the third category was the big category, that dream list of like, okay, new construction, what would you do if you just kind of had that blank check and you could do kind of a start from scratch sort of approach. And all three of those created some good discussions and some good lists for maybe however we want to use that information as we move forward. I'm going to give the microphone to Mr. Brian Smith. He is a parent of two students. One is a current middle school student, and then one will be a middle school student next year. And I asked him early on if he would kind of take the lead in just helping to present. He did some discussions or led some discussions in our groups, and he's going to kind of give you some more of the specifics of our conversations with what we talked about tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Smith here.
Okay, the current middle school building, much like the other facilities here, aren't without their strengths. So the middle school is functional. I mean, it serves its purpose day to day. It gets, the kids educated. Can you hear me? The classrooms appear to be, good enough size. As far as the layout of the school, it can get a little bit long and windy. I remember my oldest son telling me to get from one end of the school to the other school sometimes would make him a little bit tardy. So, the layout is a little bit long, but it does serve a purpose. It's basically a big L. Much like the other schools, proximity is really good. It's centrally located. It's a nice location, all the other schools, and so that's nice. Some of the problematic aspects of the school were lighting. The fluorescent lighting doesn't create a real bright environment, pretty much in all the classrooms. There are a couple sections in the school, like the lunchroom, where it's a little better lit, but the general consensus across classroom to classroom is the lighting is definitely an area that needs to be addressed. Much like the lighting, and really kind of the school itself kind of has a general feel. Somebody in one of the meetings brought up just the word tired, and that kind of resonated and got brought up from time to time throughout all the meetings. But the middle school just kind of has a little bit of a tired feel. So, the lighting, the flooring, the carpeting, the tile, all of it is in dire need of just a little bit of a facelift and modern, more of a modern look. One of the things that kind of struck us as a little bit odd as you walk through every classroom is there is no theme. You can walk through one portion of the school and know the school is, its main colors are red and white. You'd walk to the next portion of the school and you would think maybe Halstead resides in that portion of it. It is predominantly blue. I think there's a bullet point, maybe the next slide, but one of the bathrooms, I believe is purple, if I remember correctly, maybe even purple and forest green, which again, you walk outside of the hallway, it's blue. So again, it just needs a theme throughout, something when the kids go to school, they know, who they represent, and the community they live in. The parking lot in front, I don't know how many of you have been down Ridge Road or Randall Street in the morning, afternoon, much like the elementary, or even after a dance. It's a little bit of a mess, and I'm probably being pretty kind with that word. So there's no flow, it's backed up. Anybody who needs to get anybody down Randall Street is going to be in a little bit of trouble in the morning and afternoon. Much like Mrs. Crable touched on with their use of the commons, school doesn't have any. So there's no place for large gatherings, large group learnings, nothing for the kids to be able to utilize to be able to get together in that aspect. And the library, media center, we'll call it, is really just kind of like the rest of the school. It just needs an update. The chairs, I mean, I'm not a small individual, but I was borderline scared to death to sit in just for fear that I may fall on the ground. They're old. I can even guess how old they are, 30, 40 years old possibly. So some of the changes that would be necessary to support our goals, much like I had on the fluorescent lighting, it's time to just upgrade to LED. Fluorescent is unsafe in some ways with the UV exposure. It's a small amount, but day after day after day, it slowly adds up. The LED lighting obviously would be cost efficient from some standpoint in energy usage. The stage, if you've never been in there, it's a pretty large square foot. It's a large area, which has been handy this year with, distance learning. But once that stage of our life is behind us, it is a lot of square footage of this somewhat wasted space. One of the bullet points brought up was to remodel the entryway, to maybe display some of this students' artwork, just make it more, HVAC is one too, by the way. Just to make it more appealing, when you walk in, it's more welcoming instead of just a kind of a long hallway with the waffle ceiling and kind of get you to kick off to your next point. Upgrade the fine art spaces. If you've never been in the art room, space in there is at a premium. They're pretty well packed in there. Art generally takes up a lot of room. And unfortunately, Mrs. Rose doesn't have a whole lot in there. So to be able to get her a new facility or new room or more space would be, and from what I understand, it's a very popular class, would be a great addition also to the middle school. Create additional storage. Really, that'll probably resonate through every school. There's just never enough to be able to store extra desks, books, technology, media stuff, kind of all that goes into play there. Again, the new paint and flooring, I kind of hit on that earlier with a common theme throughout the school and getting a more updated paint the walls. Come up with a constant color scheme throughout the school. And again, a commons space for the kids to be able to gather in larger group learning centers or spaces, and maybe it'd be beneficial for maybe different ways of learning. That's, think about it.
Thanks, Mr. Smith. I might add exterior learning spaces too, and much like the elementary kind of spoke to, that's really come into play this year, but I think, it's been interesting this year. There's some things that we've had to do this year that we have kind of reflected on, like, man, that's a really good idea. I think we may continue to do those things even when we don't have to, as far as code goes. And I think just being outside, if it's a nice space, if it's shaded, if it's convenient to get to, those can be spaces that are really conducive to learning. So I might mention the exterior part of that too. So Mr. Rhodes, in your group, I believe you are up next.
Okay, so I'm Ty Rhodes. I'm the principal at the high school. I've been here for about 20 years now. I've been a teacher and a coach and AD assistant principal for a couple years and principal for, I think this is my 9th year now. So I was here in Heston when the last bond was passed, I was a teacher and coach then, so I've kind of seen some different things happen in our building over time. Can probably share a little bit of historical perspective with that as well. With me tonight is Derek Yoder, who was a part of our community group here in our focus group. I also want to point out that Jake Gundon is here in the crowd too. Jake, if you want to wave, everybody who's in here. And I had another person in our group who couldn't be here tonight. Melissa Carlson couldn't be here tonight. So I saw Jake walk in, so I just kind of put it on him last second here, like, hey Jake, you could like pop in up here too and say some things. So kind of put him on the spot here with that. So he might join us to share some perspective on the conversations that we had as well. So the other people that were part of our community group were Hank Humphreys, Micah and Jacqueline Larson, Melissa Carlson, Zach Phillips, Jake Gunn, I mentioned him, Drew Hebert, who is a student senior. He is our Stuco president. May have seen his name in the paper for like winning every robotics event ever. Also, Mark Landis, Courtney Warden, Derek and Joy Yoder, Adam Keeker, and Ben Hirschberger were part of that too. So I was just really thankful and pleased with how engaged the group was with the conversations that we had over a few nights here, and just want to give a little brief overview, and Derek and I might bounce some things back and forth and ask Jake to chime in a little bit here with this as well. We want to keep a little bit conversational with what we're sharing tonight. We had a series of 3 meetings. The map will pop up here in just a minute. Our building is actually about twice the square footage of the other 2 buildings, and or the same square footage as those 2 buildings combined. So it took us a couple nights to get through everything, and we still didn't go through every space in the building, but felt like that's where we needed to cut it off for our sanity with that too. And then the 3rd night was really discussion based, and we talked about strengths and weaknesses of the building, or likes and dislikes of the building. And then we did very similar scenarios what middle school did. So we used what if scenarios. What if we were keeping our existing building, what would we fix, what would we change? What if we were making some additions to the current building, but largely keeping our current building? And what if we were doing a lot of starting over with that too? And not suggesting either one is right, but just kind of going from small scale to large scale, thinking through solutions with that. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Derek to kind of talk through what we viewed as some of the strengths of the building.
One of the big keys that we saw right away was the location of the high school, recognizing how it flows with the middle school and the elementary school in this centralized area. So location, entrance, coming into the building, how it flows, so whether it's the academic side or flows into the auditorium or the gym area, it has a nice flow to it, and been pretty amazed even in the conversations of how often this facility is used by the community, whether it is church groups or whether it is other sports teams that come and utilize our facilities. The kitchen is used, the commons are used, classrooms are used, the auditorium is used, and just finding out that there's more and more ways that the community is involved in this facility. One of the pieces we also appreciated was the ease and the movement of flow back in the academic setup. So as it is set up back there, kind of the hexagon idea with the pods of different academic disciplines, how it is that they can flow from one to the next, and appreciating that ability for interaction, connection with different students and teachers along throughout the day. The flow has a natural good flow to it. Having those subjects together and having the teachers together with whatever discipline they are a part of. We appreciated how well maintained this facility is for the age that it is, that you don't see a lot of eyesores, so we appreciated the attention to the facility over the course of many years, which involved many different people. We were appreciative of the dedication to different opportunities for high schoolers, one being the pit stop, and if you get the local paper, you will have seen a nice write-up about the impact of the pit stop from when it started in the early 2000s to where it is today, and how the other schools have come in and tried to emulate something similar to the entrepreneurial opportunities with the pit stop. And the other one is the robotic spaces, from where that started way back when, to where it has grown and how we have won every state championship since it's started in Kansas. There's a lot to go off of, and to have a space that's set up for the robotics team to be able to put their robots together and compete. We appreciated the open, moves into the whole flow component when we're talking about the library. It has an open concept, and what it was in the 1970s for what it is today, using the library is different than what it was even 10, 15 years ago. So it does have a space where people can commune and be together throughout the day. It provides a lot of opportunities for more common gathering spaces. And lastly, from the likes component is our athletic facilities. We've been very impressed with across the board our facilities and what they look like. Even though our main gym is old, it definitely has an appeal to it. The way it sounds within the gym, I think other teams also appreciate competing in this gymnasium.
So thanks, Eric. So some of the things that I'm going to share might almost sound like they're contradictory. Like I'm going to say, oh, he said something about robotics being strength, and now Ty's saying like there's some weakness to that too. So hopefully I can give a good description of that, and that's where you guys can jump in on me as well if I'm doing a poor job of that. But so if you look up on the screen, that's actually the map of our building, kind of bare bones map. Doesn't have every single detail to it up there, but I guess quiz, could you even find where you're at right now on that thing? You could? Okay, that's good. So we're here. Here's the auditorium. And I've kind of used this as I guess this space is a spot to kind of sound off on this whole idea of hexagons too. Okay, so if you look at our stage right now, this wall that Derek and I are against is parallel to that wall. This wall is parallel to that wall, and that wall is parallel to that wall. And if we continued the stage on around, it would just keep being parallel. So either we decided hexagon is the right shape for a stage, and we designed our school around that, and this was the epicenter of the school, or we decided hexagon was the right shape for education, and so we designed a stage around that concept. But either way, if you've come to some performances here, and you sit in that seat over there, on that edge, a lot of times you're behind somebody. You know, so it's just kind of an interesting setup for us here in auditorium space. And I'll touch on that a little bit more, but some of the things that came out about our building, and if you've driven by, which I'm sure you have many times, we don't have a lot of natural light in our building. So there's some classrooms that do, but a lot that don't. And I could give several examples. So here's a classroom right here that is completely interior. This would be Miss Fabrich's classroom. She teaches government, world geography, psychology, sociology. These are outside walls right here. Gosh, I'm shaky with that movement right there. There's many feet of outside wall. We don't have natural light in there. Okay, I could go through all the way around with that, and we've got those spaces that just feel like you're kind of in a cave a little bit too. So that's a thing that's pretty noticeable as you drive by, and then when you actually get into the spaces that have a lack of natural light in there. We also have classroom spaces with really challenging shapes. So Derek mentioned a good flow. All right, so we've got English together. We've got social studies together. We've got science together. We've got math together. Okay, but then what also happens is you got to go through a classroom to get to a classroom. Okay, so a lot of disruptions during a class time with that. Okay, and if you look at all those shapes of all those classrooms up there, there is zero consistency. Okay, so it's kind of like Mr. Smith mentioned with colors. At the middle school, the purple and green, I've never even noticed that before. Now that's all I'm going to ever see when I go over there. But the same will be true for us with our classroom spaces. Okay, and a really interesting one, really the laser pointer. Here would be our Spanish classroom right here. And I would be willing to bet there's not another classroom in the United States that exact same shape right there too. So, and another interior space, no natural light to that one too. Okay, so it's really funky and challenging angles. And the thing that I can do in a classroom space is sometimes you have a little bit of wasted space because you get a weird angle. You get a 30-degree angle in some corner of it. I'm just throwing 30 degrees out randomly. But then now to create some space, it's pretty hard to put a square desk into a triangular corner of the classroom right there. Okay, so some interesting things with the way classes were laid out. And a lot of schools, plus or minus a couple years, around 1970, this is when this opened in 1970, plus or minus a couple years was kind of that pod concept was a big deal. Okay, that's changed over time. Okay, so another thing we talked about was does the space support growing programs? So yeah, it's cool to have Pit Stop. We've got a space for robotics. A lot of you have probably watched things on Swelter Sports Network, another growing program. So there would be kind of three programs I would just point to as kind of some CT type programs, a lot of those programs. And they're growing, they're doing really cool things. The robotics classroom would be, we have about 250 middle schoolers, but there's 7,000 of them here on a game night, trying to get it in there to get a smoothie, right? So there's some things that we could potentially do with our pit stop space as well. This area became a big part of the discussion as well, our fine arts pod. So we kind of up there, we took everything kind of to the left on night one and everything kind of to the right if you drew a midline on night two. Fine arts pod became a big part of the conversation. And, I think this space is challenging for hosting the best event, okay? Space-wise, if we had a little more space with an auditorium, we would do more things in here. It limits us concert and performance-wise on space, and certainly the shape and function of the space back behind it. Our art room, you actually come through the auditorium to go to the art room, so that's a little weird. The art room's back there, and it does not function well either. I mean, it'd be similar to every other classroom, but even some different challenges from that when you start talking about plumbing and some other things with that. We have a choir room that can't actually hold our choir, so choir and band share the same space together. Not a big issue for us. We have enough kids that do both, that we don't schedule those on top of each other, but our choir room does not support the size of our choir program. Okay, and again, fine arts programs are really important to us, really high enrollment, super successful programs for us here at the school as well. And then locker rooms and bathrooms. If you've never been into, or it's been a few years since the pool closed, the pool locker rooms, we use those for visiting teams. If you remember going into those, they're not very big. We actually canceled one of our meetings one night because we had 2 pipes break in about maybe a 2-hour period, less. One of them being in that boys' locker room in there. So Les and Ben and I were just knocking out the ceiling, pulling out the sheetrock to kind of get that figured out in there. So those are areas that need to be addressed as well. We've kind of got an eyesore on the backside of the building now with no pool. Eyesore now, and maybe opportunity later on for us too. Okay. So I'll turn back over to Derek to talk about, so we're going to kind of go through those 3 scenarios of what if.
So what would we do if we just renovated the existing area? One of the components is recognizing the impact of our HVAC system, our electrical system, and our plumbing infrastructure issues. And I know that's probably going to be talked about a little bit later, but recognizing how glaring that is in this building as a whole. There's a lot of hidden expenses that we don't see. And we're also talking about an academic renovation cleanout, or gutted, if you will, with the odd shapes that you can see up there. What would that really look like? And to get a creative architect in here to be able to repurpose and make it of a more functional space because of those hidden angles, well, not the hidden angles, the angles that exist that are very glaring, and the ways to make this a more conducive learning environment, and providing, knocking down a bunch of walls, redistributing some space, definitely giving in more natural light. I've heard it from students and I've heard it from former teachers that part of their decision to stay or to go was because they were part of that interior classroom where they had no natural light all day long. And so a positive learning environment, not only for the kids, but also for the teachers, to have some of that natural light. The acoustics, because of those rooms are so close to one another, you can hear each other through on a consistent basis, and how distracting that can be for someone who is easily distracted. That would have been hard for me as a student if I would have went to high school here. Ty already identified the arts area, the huge history of our success in our performing arts, and that going along with what facilities we do have. It's unfortunately it's not the best space for that learning environment. And then just having a lot of doors. There's a lot of exit areas where kids can run out or people can come in. The safety of those. So renovating in a sense where we put in more natural light, maybe replacing some of the doors with windows, but creating some more space. One of the other big areas is the bathrooms. If you're in one part of the high school and it's in between classes, you can't make it to the bathroom and get back to class in time without being tardy. So it's recognizing more bathroom space, and meeting spaces for staff, utilizing some nooks and crannies here, meeting with Ty even this morning as we're getting ready for this event, just how that space is set up for teachers and administrators, but recognizing half of it is storage because there isn't enough space for storage. And that's been one of the big pieces with the pods, is the central part of those pods were supposed to be set up for teachers to have their office space, but it is essentially turned into a storage closet. So that's one of the big areas of our existing that we would want to change, and Ty just touched on it too, and the locker rooms would probably be one. Even though we like the locker rooms not to be the best place for our visitors, right? I think where we're at is a little bit on the embarrassing side.
Yeah, I'm either apologizing or like trying to talk them into liking it when they show up one or the other with our locker room. So the second scenario then was, what if we, largely keep the existing space, but create some kind of addition or additions to our building? And again, if you look at kind of the exterior map there, the exterior boundaries of our building, and you start thinking about adding on in the classroom space area, I have no doubt somebody can draw some blueprints for that. But the question will be what actually makes sense with the current layout of our classes too. So just thinking more, and I'm going to speak in really big general terms here with additions in, and not say here's the one right answer with that. But that pool space that would be, that was the pool right there. And here's those tiny little pool locker rooms right there that are pretty gross. And if you've been back there, you've seen that's dirt now. And some of the wall's been taken out back there. So there's space and real estate back there to do something. It's just a matter of what should that something be. One of the things I think, once we came into this space and actually got into the art room, and we got into the choir room, and the little nooks and crannies of the hallways back here, it was pretty quickly identified by the group, and a lot of conversation was occurring in the moment about how this space doesn't seem to support those programs. So a lot of opportunity here. If we're going to make an addition, maybe it's to change this, because I don't know how we would just move the walls to fix maybe some of the needs that we were talking about in this particular pod. I'm not saying there couldn't be, but maybe that's one thought with that. There's also some ideas we didn't talk about necessarily weight room. We went and looked at that, but a lot of ideas have been floating around. That may be something that Clint talks about as well, with weight room, locker room space out there. If something different, addition for this or fix for this could kind of be built out this way. We've got space around our building to do some of those things too. And, and that goes on top of then, how do we address what we see with those current classroom spaces to fix the natural light, some of those things too. So.
And then what to do if we build new. One of the hottest topics, I think, was the sightlines. If we built new, we could see everywhere in the building, essentially. Where here, there's an issue going on back in the classroom area. You could be 3 corners so you can get, or even be close to where the people are. So having, from the safety standpoint, longer hallways, line of sight, more natural light, and program driven. Where are we today, but where are we going to be 20 years from now? Does the new facility provide opportunities to continue to grow and expand what we already offer, but then what could be? I mean, we talked 20 years ago about robotics. That wouldn't even have been a conversation, but where is it today? Keep the campus cohesive with the elementary, middle, and high school. And is there a possibility to build up, not just build out, so we can remain on our current real estate? And when we build with the idea of our community in mind as well, how we can modernize some of our common spaces to utilize more of what the community needs, to utilize the space more than just education. Having the right size classrooms that's conducive for learning and growth. And if it does come to a place of this nature where we do build something new, is to have a project manager that is used to doing school expansions or new school builds.
Yeah, so there's kind of maybe just general big ideas there for those things. Nothing specific on those. It'd be hard for us to nail down specifics right now. I was going to, just another thought that I had that Derek and I and Melissa talked about this morning was something that came out in our group is people like the fact that our schools are right here, kind of centrally located in town and easy access to. I know as a parent I do too. I send my kids on their bikes or whatever all the time to get here. And so we like how that's set up in our town and the space that we have here. And hope we can do all these things just right here in a way that still keeps really easy access and opportunity for community space right here on our school grounds as well. So I think I'll turn it over to Clint for athletics. And I may have to go into some of Les's presentations since they stole a lot of my thunder, and that's okay. As we looked at athletic facilities, we had a group of some teachers that are coaches, we had some school board members that were on there, we had a community member that was on there, and we had a high school student that joined us as well. And we began to look at and see, and we waited until it kind of warmed up outside because, you know, we could look at the gyms and those spaces inside the building. But it was kind of cold there for a while, so we kind of waited until spring tried to hit before we went out to look at some things. But we kind of had some ideas about what we were going to see and what we knew. So, you know, our coaches kind of already knew kind of where we were at with some of our facilities. And we looked at, you know, what are the strengths of our current facilities? And that was a big one for us because as you look at Hog Stadium, it's a very distinct place, it's a very distinct area, and I would venture to say there are very few facilities like that around the state. It's got a good, cool feel to it. It's a great place to watch a track meet. It's a great place to watch our kids run over the berm pregame before a football game. Those are things that we see as a sense of pride in our community. Derek kind of hit on our main gym. It's a very unique facility as teams walk into it. And if you've been there, if you were here in 2015, when our girls and boys both made it to state that year, that place, if the fire marshal would have been there, we were probably in trouble that night. I don't know how many people were actually in there, but it was packed, and it was loud, and it was crazy, and it was a great week for sports to be in our facility. And so that's kind of a really neat and unique facility for us too. And we take a lot of pride in those things. And one of the things is we talked about, you know, our athletic facilities. You know, there are a lot of places in our buildings when patrons or opposing teams come into our facilities, they're never going to see, you know, probably the science pod. They're never going to see a lot of our academic areas. But one thing that they will definitely see when they walk in our building are our gymnasiums, when they see our football field, when they see our middle school gymnasium for middle school sports. Those are things that they're going to see. We look at it from that aspect of, you know, what do we want those to look like? You know, what are some things that we can do? Because as we look at our football field, we like how it looks. We like the field that's out there, but how do we continue to improve it so that when people walk in, it's the best thing we can give them. So that was very much part of our discussions as we began. The other thing, of course, was we looked at that too. We looked at, you know, those positives with what we already have, but we also know that there are some things that just are going to have to be addressed. And some of those things, some of the things that are, like I said, problematic. High school hit on our pool locker rooms. That became a fairly big issue at the end of basketball this year. It's kind of hard to put teams into a locker room when the ceiling's gone, there's no water, and it's about 29 degrees in there. That's a problem. So we had to get really inventive on how to get sub-state basketball done with that going on. We also know our tennis restroom facility out there off the tennis courts that baseball and tennis use. It has some major issues that probably aren't going to be solved by a roto-rooter or continually running water through the sewer lines out there, because there are issues with those things that we just can't fix by, you know, a $5 fix. There's going to have to be some things that just have to be done. Also, we looked at, you know, even though I don't have Mr. Rhodes' map up here, but triangles or hexagons or anything like that don't really do well for us with storage. We like things to be square so we can get things in there. We have some storage areas for activities and athletics that just, we can get things into them awkwardly, but we lose space when we try to store things. So that's kind of one of those things where, you know, we want to have a better functional areas for storage for those types of things. We also talked about the age of some of our facilities. You know, there are just some things that are going to start to age out on us as we go. And those are things that we talked about, how do we address those things as well. We also looked at bleachers. If you've been on our bleachers in any of the gyms lately, or if you haven't, swing by sometime when we're pulling them out or putting them in. You can get a good leg and shoulder workout usually. Mr. Georg allows me to help him. And I do need the exercise, but I'd rather do it somewhere else. So our bleachers are starting to wear down. There are just some things that, to continue to function the way they need to function, we're going to have to address those things as well. We also talked, Derek, about weight room. Weight room is not attached to the school. Mr. Bowerly's a tough guy, and he doesn't mind going out there in February. But as you walk from this building out to where the weight room's at for classes, it's a situational thing. Those are things that they have to do each and every day for class. Is there some way to incorporate it into our building? You know, and that's something that we kind of talk about as well. If you've been out to Hog Stadium, and they talk about restrooms are an issue. Yes. And then we even talked about, you know, everybody probably assumed that our facilities group was just going to talk about sports, but we talked about this area. We talked about how this is set up, how the fire room is set up, how those areas really probably aren't real conducive for having as many kids as we have in these areas when they're in here during school day or when they're performing during, you know, we've got a variety show coming up in here. And, you know, we know that that's going to be the last seat that gets bought for anything in here. You're going to buy these first, here a second, there a third, and then if you absolutely didn't get a seat, you're going to have to get one of those. And we reduce the price on those because we know that that's a hard spot to see everything on the stage when they're performing up here. So with all those things being said, we looked at changes that might be necessary to support our goals here. And we talked a lot about, you know, what do we want, and again, it was kind of looking forward. You know, we don't want to do anything that's not going to be conducive for these facilities to be very much usable for way beyond us all being here. We want them to be lasting. We want them to be part of the pride that our community has for itself. And that was one of the big things we talked about was, you know, I think a lot of us realize when we walk into these buildings that we have it pretty well. And we talked about the upkeep, we talked about some of the things that exist here right now that, you know, Heston is Heston because of a lot of the things here with our school district. And a lot of that goes into our facilities that we have right now. How do we improve those things? So as we talk about facelifts, you know, that hopefully is the less pricey route. There are some things that we just can do probably to make some things better around here with minor detail things. And so those were some of the things that we talked about, and we know that if we chose to do something in the future, that we wouldn't necessarily want that to be the focus of everything, because it's a small part of what we do, but we also felt like it's a very important part of what we do. So with that being said, and as we looked at beyond our lifetime needs versus wants, you know, we did the whole, what do we need to function? What do we need that would make things easier for teachers, coaches, and kids? And then we did the blank check thing, just dreaming. And you can imagine, you've already heard that probably 2 or 3 times tonight. We kind of went along those same routes with those types of things. But we talked about the specific needs that we have. And some of those things, just like we talked, locker rooms, spaces, areas, storage, those are definitely needs that we have, okay? Things that would make easier practices, easier competitions, things like that would be, maybe a track expansion to a 7 to 8 lane track. We talked about, would an additional gym be something that would be beneficial? An additional gym would mean that probably during a volleyball season, basketball season, we don't have kids either practicing early in the morning or 6 to 8:30 at night. Those would be beneficial to our kids, those would be beneficial to our coaches. Now, that's talking about a lot more money than just fixing some things that we need around the facility. And then we look at just, the image of our schools and community standards. So, we talked about, again, Heston is Heston, and a lot of people, when they come into our facilities, will compliment us on, wow, this is, especially like we had some teams here for basketball that had never been in that gym. I had some comments from schools and some officials and some people that were just like, well, this is just a really neat place. This is a really cool place to have a basketball game. And it was actually one of the officials, and he said, it would have been awesome to have a full crowd here. We were talking a little bit about COVID. He's like, I would really love to come back for that the next time when it's a full crowd. I was like, it's a pretty cool place to watch a basketball game when that's occurring. Hop Stadium's a great place to watch a football game when it's, we're getting into late fall games. And we have a lot of great things in our facilities already. And how do we improve on those? How do we make it be better as people come into our community? Okay? I think that's it for me. I think Mr. Gure is up or no?
I told Les he has to come up with me, because as we get into the next topic, and it'll be our last major topic of the evening on infrastructure, we want to kind of talk through what we've done here in the winter and early spring to provide some assessments of different aspects of our infrastructure. Really appreciate everybody who shared from a building perspective. I call those the fun things. These are the not so fun things. These are the things that you don't see, but you know when they're not working. And I think Derek mentioned that, several of you mentioned that we recognize there are considerable needs. We know age, we're all aging, and our equipment is doing the same. And over time, things don't work the way they used to, and now's a really good time for us to evaluate our systems as a whole, because as I go back, and I want to apologize to anybody watching the Swather Sports Network, because I know we've had some in and out, we've cut in and out on audio and video, but we will be getting all this information out to you with a lot of details. We'll add some details to the presentation materials tonight. But as we go back and look at our capital outlay budget, how do we address things as they come up? It doesn't take much, as Les knows and has to explain to me a lot, it doesn't take much to spend a lot of money when things are breaking down. And being able to assess things holistically, as we've done over the past couple of weeks and really past couple of months, has provided us with some scope as to what would it look like to be ahead, or maybe to work from being ahead a little bit more than always responding to. And so we're going to give you an idea of what that looks like from a couple of different vantage points. Let's just hit me anytime you want to jump in. So we've got a lot of details, whether it's HVAC or plumbing, roofs, electrical, fire systems. We've got a lot of details at our disposal at this point about current conditions and recommended upgrades. And we can provide that information. This is just a very rough overview, or kind of a non-detailed overview of some things that we potentially would be looking at doing if money wasn't an object, right? If we could just come in and start replacing things that are aging out. And looking at HVAC, that's the most considerable need that we have in the district. And I mentioned just 6 years ago, if a chiller went out or we had to replace a boiler, we weren't comfortable doing that out of capital outlay without financing it over a period of time. We've gotten to a place where when things break down, we can address those things with capital outlay, but again, it doesn't take much to cut into
$1 million or $1.5 million or whatever we're operating in capital outlay. This is an overview of our HVAC systems as we look at the different buildings. You can see from the high school and middle school, the equipment is older. We've done some replacement. Elementary school's in a little bit better shape, improving that overall system, but the total amount is we did a pretty thorough assessment, and Les and some crews worked on that. We're looking at potentially up to $6 million that we could spend to get us to a place where we feel pretty good about the HVAC system in our district. Anything on HVAC? Roofs, kind of the same process. Had some groups come in, do some analysis of all of our roofs in the district. There's some serviceability left. We haven't done a lot of large-scale replacement. We've done some repairs over time, over the past 5 or 6 years, but we know there's a lot of challenges there, a lot of concerns, and we're estimating about $1.7 million to get us to a good place with roofs. With plumbing, there's needs at each building. Do you experience issues with Heston water in your home? We experience those same issues if there's no water softeners. With our plumbing systems, the breakdown by building, you can see where some of those areas of focus. I think the elementary school mentioned some of the drainage issues. We know some of that could be addressed by just how things drain off roofs. $920,000, which doesn't include new fixtures. If we wanted to update bathroom fixtures and shower fixtures, which is another need that we have, then that amount would go up, but that would be a pretty substantial way to address plumbing. Electrical, I think overall we're in okay shape in most of the district except for this building. And that's where the greatest needs lie in terms of electrical upgrades, which is where this assessment came from, would be the high school. Les has told me this for quite some time, a lot of our equipment is obsolete. You can't find replacement parts for what we currently have because of the age of the components that we have. So completely replacing wiring across this building would be about $560,000. Our fire alarm systems, updating that to current standards. We have a fire alarm system that works, but there's a lot of issues with it, again, due to the age of the system, the parts that we need to replace. To upgrade to a system that does the things that modern systems do, that's across the district. We're looking at about $243,000 to make that type of update. So just those areas that we went over to do everything that we would want to do would cost about $10 million. Okay, and obviously that's more than we have in our annual capital outlay budget, but it gives you a little bit of an idea as to the age of our equipment and the different things that we have to address over time. So, and again, we've got detailed reports on all these things. This is just a pretty quick overview. Les, what do you have to add?
Yeah, I don't know. If anybody has any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them. The clock is certainly ticking on some of these systems. We've been very fortunate to be able to keep up with the systems up to this point. Been very blessed to be able to, we haven't had to go without. There are certainly some items in this list that the clock is certainly ticking on. I think Elisa can probably attest to the roof issues whenever it rains. So if you quit praying for rain, that'd be great. So HVAC, that's something we can probably address a little bit at a time as needed, but the plumbing issues are probably pretty major. It's not uncommon for just to have a random leak in the copper pipe somewhere just because of the aggressive nature of the water here in Heston. So I think just in the last 2 weeks I've had 17 faucets fail just because they're lined up, and even when I'm asking for help to come in and help me replace that stuff, we can't keep up. So that's really, Ben, you did a great job of covering that. So.
Okay, again, as we look at those numbers, those are big numbers, and that's extensive work to those systems. Like Les said, as we're operating on an annual basis, we take care of things as they come.
This is a look at really the entire scope of the work that could be done on those things that you don't notice until something's not working the way it's supposed to. And like I mentioned, we've got detailed reports on all those different systems. As we close this evening and kind of look at next steps as we continue to evaluate our facilities, there's a few key questions that we want to keep coming back to, and we'll talk about what does the month of April look like as this conversation continues. But some of the questions that we came up with as we think about facilities and how can we help kind of guide the board as they make decisions about how we address facilities in a long-term way. The first one, what changes are necessary, and I think the different groups spoke to this, as we think about what our goals are for educating young people in Heston. And there's a long, strong tradition for doing that really well. And I think whether, again, it's facilities or anything else that we talk about, we want to always come back to the goals that we have and how we're continuing to grow as a school district and how facilities help us do that. We've talked a lot about programs and opportunities that kids are provided, and we want to make sure that we're able to continue to provide those and expand those and not let facilities become a roadblock for that. So how are we able to achieve or pursue the educational goals that we have? With the challenges, you know, you heard a lot of things that are good about our facilities, and you heard some things that are challenging about our facilities. But how do we address those concerns looking forward? I mentioned in the early part of our presentation that will be available to you, mentioned kind of how we do that on an annual basis, but we also have a bond that's being paid off in about a year and a half, a little less than a year and a half. And so that means there are options that the community can consider if we want to do something more substantial. And that's a question that we're putting on the table. And as we go through the month of April, we're asking our community and anybody who wants to engage in this topic to give us feedback on that. What is it that the community would like to see us do in Heston at this time? So we've got some options, we've got some things to look at, we've got some needs, and I think we've got a process here in the short term to engage the community, because no matter what we do, we want to be very transparent, and we want to make sure that it's a partnership with the community as we assess whatever it is that we want to do in the future. So just real quick, as we finish up this evening, we're looking at a really short-term next step, just this month. So it's already April. We've got a couple of opportunities here in April for our Board of Education to get together. We've been talking a little bit about facilities, but that will amp up. But in the short term, between now and April 26th, which is it would technically be our third board meeting of the month since this is the first one tonight, we want to provide the information from tonight's session. So that's going to be made available in a recording format for anybody to go and check out. So if you want to go back and hear what the elementary or the middle school or the high school said, or you want to review some of those needs from an infrastructure standpoint, you'll have the ability to do that through that stream. We also will provide a very detailed set of presentation materials. So this presentation that you're seeing, that'll be kind of the bones of it. We're going to fill in some of the details that we shared because we want to make sure we're providing very good and accurate and adequate information, because ultimately we want to ask, what direction does the community want us to go? And we want to be able to provide some of that feedback to the board at that April 26th meeting so that they can begin to make informed decisions about next steps. Maybe the community says, you know what? There's needs, but the facilities are in okay shape, nothing's falling apart. Let's continue to operate on an annual budget through our capital outlay. There may be enough needs that people say, we need to do something more significant. We need to look at, since we're paying off a bond in 2022, let's start at least taking steps to evaluate what could that look like after we pay that off. Is now the time, is this the right time to have that conversation about something more substantial? And so we're going to put together a survey that's going to go out either late this week or early next week. We're going to try to get that out to the community so that anybody who wants to share feedback can do so so that our board is receiving that feedback and can make a decision about next steps based on what the community is telling us. And that's our goal. So you'll have an opportunity to do that shortly. If you have any questions, Les said call him. If it's on infrastructure, that's a great idea. But certainly feel free to contact me anytime. You can call our central office, you can email me. A lot of people have my cell number because I was getting lots of texts when the audio wasn't working, and I hope that improved, and that's perfectly fine. I don't hide that, and you can certainly use that number as well if you have it. But we just want to do a good job engaging everybody. We talk to many people who have ideas. Okay? Really appreciate everybody being here. Again, if you need anything, if you need more information, or you're just interested in talking through some things that could be possible, don't hesitate to reach out to me, to Les, any of our principals, and we'd love to talk to you more about it. So thank you very much. Have a great evening. Appreciate it.